The Cleveland Metropolitan School District Board of Education is currently considering recommendations for cuts at the school level as well as in central administration to address a $47.5 million deficit. Among those recommendations, the closure of 7 school buildings as well as hundreds of layoffs, including 650 teachers for a savings of about $74 million. We sat down with Interim CEO Peter Raskind to try to gain some insight as to how the district might begin to face down its fiscal challenges.
There really is no good scenario. I think we should just start with that. The best case scenario, I think, is we do the most thoughtful job we can do of addressing that deficit, meaning that we implement a series of actions kind of across the district and across the functions in the district that help us address that deficit without undue burden on any particular area, any particular department, any particular function. But let me be clear, it's not as if this isn't going to be painful. It is going to be extremely painful simply given the size of the deficit.
Based on the figures that we're talking about, you're looking beyond just this coming year. It looks like you're trying to go beyond what some might consider a Band-Aid for this year. You're trying to go a little bit forward. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. What you say is exactly right. I think there's been a history, based on what I can discern looking backward, of kind of solving the next year's problem, going phew, wiping our brow, and then a year later we're right back addressing the next year's issue. So we did make a very conscious decision to try to address at least the next couple of years. And let me also add, address the next couple of years without any assumption of an operating levy being passed that would provide further assistance. We think it's going to be difficult to pass the levy, although we do want to move in that direction. But we haven't assumed that. We've assumed we've got to control our own destiny. We would love to be able to get a couple of years ahead of this so that we can be on a sustainable financial course and turn our attention to where our attention should be, which is educating Cleveland's children.
You said the L word. We're talking about a levy. And I think you made it clear earlier to the central administration staff that a levy does not fix all the problems. What will a levy, looking within the next few months, what will it do for the district? How close does it put you?
Well, of course, it very much depends on the size of the levy that's requested of the voters and what they vote upon. But our thinking and our best guess has been that the passage of a levy of reasonable size would definitely be a big help. But probably not, in fact, very probably not large enough to solve the problem by itself. So it wasn't as if we could magically get help from the voters and not have to address the issues we have to address. Furthermore, we feel very strongly that philosophically, almost morally, we have a responsibility to the voters to do everything we can possibly do to run the district just as leanly and as efficiently as we possibly can while delivering a terrific educational experience for children. We need to take those actions. We need to deliver that before we, I think, can go to the voters and ask for further support. Now, all that said, the voters have not passed an operating levy for the Cleveland schools since 1996. That's a long time in school district land. And so we do think it's time to go back to the voters and ask for additional support. But we want to do it on a very sound basis and be able to say with a very straight face that we've implemented everything else that we can and should to set this district on a sustainable financial course.
Okay, let's talk a little bit in terms of maybe slightly more specific terms. With the recommendations, we're talking about closing schools. Let's start there. We were here last year talking about closing schools. It's an emotional topic. It's an emotional proposition for people in the community. So how many schools, if you're able to tell us, do you think may do the trick, at least for this particular set of recommendations?
So we have recommended to the Board of Education the closure of 7 schools. And of course the Board of Education is considering that, and we'll vote on it in early to mid-April. We think that that's the appropriate number at this point in time in terms of reducing the capacity, excess capacity of the school district, and of course realizing some cost savings. You're quite right. Just last year we were closing schools, And there's no assurance whatsoever that next year or the year after we might not also be thinking about or talking about closing schools. The fact is, the enrollment of the school district has fallen steadily over time. 10 years ago, it was some 75,000 students. Today, it's something like 43,000. And frankly, we project it to fall further. We wish that wasn't the case, but there are other dynamics at work beyond just those that we can control. So we have a responsibility. It's unpleasant and it's hard, but we have a responsibility to keep adjusting the capacity of the school district to the enrollment size. And that's the spirit in which we have recommended these school closures. I want to be really clear that we do think about it and we do understand the role that a school plays in a neighborhood. And you're quite right. It's emotional. It's about a lot more than just educating children in that building. We know that. And we've tried to be thoughtful about that. Yet we also have to take the steps that we have to take to make sure that we keep adjusting the cost structure of the district as enrollment changes. And we've tried to balance that. That's what's resulted in our recommendation to close these 7 schools.
How do you decide which schools to close? I mean, are we talking, is it an Eastside versus Westside phenomenon because there are more schools to close on the Eastside? How do you come to those conclusions?
Well, I think we had a team, that did a very, very thorough and rigorous job of evaluating all 94 buildings in the district, whether they're Eastside or Westside, based on a set of very objective criteria, namely the utilization of the building, the capacity versus the current enrollment in the building, the condition of the building, is it in good condition or terrible condition, the academic performance of the building, the availability of nearby schools to accept students were we to think about closing that building, transportation patterns. We think about all of those criteria, none more important than another. It's a package of criteria. Against those criteria, all 94 buildings in the district were evaluated, and ultimately we concluded that these 7 made sense to think about closing at this time. Now it so happens this year all 7 are on the East Side, and some may react to that. Frankly, we weren't terribly surprised by that for 2 reasons. First, we have more buildings on the East Side than the West Side, quite a few more. And secondly, the new census data indicates that while the city has shrunk, the East Side has shrunk at a greater rate than the West Side. So you put all those factors together, it's not shocking that we would have a bias toward East Side school closures.
What about personnel? How many positions district-wide are we talking, or is it too early to discuss? How many teachers or how many central administration folks? What's going to happen along the lines of personnel?
Somewhere in the neighborhood of 800, which is a very large number, much larger than prior years, and reflects, I think, simply the size of the deficit that we're facing in the next couple of years. We're also taking a very hard look at the central office. I don't think we're quite ready yet to say exactly how many layoffs might occur in central office, although I have to say with complete honesty, I don't think it's going to be 0. We just want to do a very thoughtful job of evaluating and understanding central office functions and making sure that we don't do something that's needlessly hasty. What we do know is that we need to realize some cost savings from the central office staff, and we will.
$1.4 million, it looks like, could be saved on academic programs based on the recommendation that you've made. It's been a little more than a year since the district undertook the transformation plan, the academic transformation, which is underway and will be for several years going forward. Now, how does this portion of the recommendations affect a transformation going forward?
I don't think those particular recommendations affect the transformation plan terribly negatively. Look, none of these are easy. If they were easy, they would have been done long ago. And if they were obvious, of course, they would have been done long ago. So anything we're talking about today is, by definition, painful. There's just no way around that. We do have a series of recommendations from the academics department related to programs, each one of which is frankly not terribly large, but adds up to the $1.4 million that you mentioned. Those recommendations have come directly from Eric Gordon and his team, making the same kinds of tough decisions that are going to be made and have been made across the district.
Probably one of the more notable recommendations is the selling of the central administration building itself. And of course, I know there's going to be reaction to that from different sectors in the community going forward. How likely is that? How possible is that? And, you know, with what's going on across the street, almost on any side of the building, is this a good time for that?
Well, we think it is a good time. As you point out, it happens to be a time when there is really positive things occurring downtown, very nearby our building. We have the Medical Mart going up across the street. We have a major renovation going up across 6th Street. So if there's going to be a good time, it seems like this would be it. So maybe we'll be fortunate in that regard. But I think the core issue is we've got a building that is historic and really quite majestic by any standard, but also, frankly, in some level of disrepair. My own view is not super functional in terms of office space for people who occupy offices each day. A lot of common area space that isn't put to terribly good use. And it's also clear that at some point, were we to stay in this building, we would have to put significant money into the building simply to update it and to maintain it. I understand, for example, that the roof is original. Well, this building's been around a while. That roof's probably going to start to leak at some point. So all of that would seem to suggest that it's worth exploring whether this building has value to someone else for another purpose, and would create an opportunity for us to move into some other space and save some money and avoid spending some money in the future. So that's what we're exploring. We're led to believe, at least initially, that it may be a good time to do that, that there may be individuals who would be, or developers who would be interested in this building for various purposes. And frankly, given everything else that's going on, we think we would be irresponsible if we didn't explore the value of this building, given all of the other actions that we've already talked about today.
I would ask you if the set of recommendations is an all or nothing proposition for the board. Can they take a line item approach? I mean, is it, this is it, you can take it all or leave it? How is it going to work?
Well, no, it's not an all or nothing approach. Certainly, it is intended to be and is a package of recommendations, a series, and if there's a reason to alter or even to reject a single one of them, of course the board has the freedom to do that. The only point I would make, and I would certainly have made the same point to the board, is at the end of the day, we do need to address the deficit. We don't have the luxury of saying, well, we don't want to do that and we don't want to do this, and come up short in terms of addressing that deficit. That's not optional. So if we do decide not to do something, we probably have to think of something else to do. And we've tried to think of pretty much everything we can. So, of course, nothing's non-negotiable, and certainly the board has the freedom to approve or disapprove what they wish, but we do face the realities of the financial situation.
Looking at the other cuts, what are we looking at?
We have talked about some cutbacks to extracurricular activities. We still have to work on and think through exactly what form those are going to take. But we are, we are talking about some cutbacks on extracurriculars and athletics. We think we can realize some efficiencies with respect to transportation that we don't think will have much of an impact on families, but we think given the number of buses and bus routes we run, perhaps we can find some savings there by operating just a little more efficiently. We are going to realize some cutbacks with respect to textbooks, namely adopting a stance that will be really just in a replacement mode with textbooks as opposed to out purchasing new and improved textbooks. This is now the second year in a row, essentially, where we've cut back textbooks, which we really don't want to do, but it's a big dollar item. So you're quite right. There are a series of other actions that we've also tried to think through and adopt that would have the potential to contribute to meeting this deficit. No one should think that anyone here at the school district, including me, takes any of these actions lightly, that we don't appreciate the seriousness, that we don't appreciate the impact on people's lives and households and livelihoods. We do. I can't describe to you how much I wish, as I'm sure many others do, that this wasn't the case and that we didn't need to do these things. But I also think it's important. In effect, we have a moral responsibility to confront reality as it is, not as we wish it was. And this is the reality we face. It's not just Cleveland and Cleveland schools. Every school district across the country is facing financial challenges, and the urban school districts are facing their own special financial challenges. So we're in this soup with a bunch of others, but we have to confront it. So we will do so. We'll try to do so with dignity and with grace and with appreciation for and empathy for the people whose lives are impacted. And we'll try to do it as crisply as we can so that we can all focus on what's most important, namely educating children in Cleveland.
Mr. Raskind met with central administration staff prior to submitting his proposal to the Board of Education to ensure employees would have some idea of what to expect. Now, obviously, the budget crisis here in the district is an ongoing issue. We'll have developments for you as they come. Reporting for CMSD, I'm Brian McIntyre.